Welcome to today's Torah study. We are in Shemot in Exodus 1. So we're going to be getting started right now. If everybody can join me in the Shema. Shema Israel, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Baruch Shem Kevod, Malchuto, Leolam Vayed. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Blessed be his glorious name, whose kingdom is forever and ever. Amen. Okay, and we'll go right into the blessing over the reading of the Torah.
Right.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bakar banu mikol hamim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah. Amen. Blessed are you, O Lord our God, King of the universe, who chose us from all the peoples and gave to us his Torah. Blessed are you, O Lord, the giver of the Torah. Amen. Amen. So if you'd open up your Bibles to Exodus chapter 1, we will get started.
Yeah.
Oh, boy, I can't believe it. We're already out of Genesis. Oh, it does. It
3 years to get out of that. 3 years when we were there years ago.
Okay, and Shemot, Exodus chapter 1, it says, now these are the names of the sons of Israel who came to Egypt with Jacob. They came each one with his household. Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, and Benjamin, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, and Asher. All the persons who came from the loins of Jacob were 70 in number, but Joseph was already in Egypt. Joseph died, and all his brothers and all that generation. But the sons of Israel were fruitful and increased greatly and multiplied and became exceedingly mighty, so that the land was filled with them. Now a new king arose over Egypt, who did not know Joseph. He said to his people, behold, the people of the sons of Israel are more and more mightier than we. Come, let us deal wisely with them, or else they will multiply, and in the event of war, they will also join themselves to those who hate us and fight against us and depart from the land. So they appointed taskmasters over them to afflict them with hard labor, and they built for Pharaoh storage cities, Pithom and Ramesses. I'm going to stop right there because we have a whole lot to cover. Let's do the blessing after the reading from the Torah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah timet v'chayei olam natabotekanu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah. Amen. Blessed are you, O Lord our God, King of the universe, who gave us the Torah of truth and planted everlasting life within us. Blessed are you, O Lord, the giver of the Torah. Amen. Amen. Okay, everybody, you can have a seat. Let's dig in. And if anybody has anything that they want to share out in Zoom land, Kathleen is monitoring the chat room, and raise your hand and she'll call upon you. So
We'll be chatty.
Susan, I see you're unmuted, so I muted you.
Thank
Okay. All right, everybody. Whew. You know, I've shared this before. Every time I think of Exodus and I think of Moses, you know, who do you think I picture? Charleston Heston. So this is a wonderful book, but let's yeah, exactly. That's probably what Andrew is saying. Who's that? Okay. We do have two more microphones over here. I plugged them in so they could get charged. They were left out from Friday. So I plugged them in when I got here, and hopefully they've got a good charge. I see that they're not blinking anymore, so maybe they do have a good charge. Yeah. Okay, this week's Torah portion is Shemot, Exodus 1 to 6:1. Last week we finished the first book of we finished the first book in the 1 year cycle. We are in the 1 year cycle of the Torah portions. So last week we finished Genesis. In the last 14 chapters of Genesis, 13 were all about Joseph, the son of Jacob. The life of Joseph. Joseph shows us the love and how God cares and protects those who love him faithfully and righteously. Despite being sold into slavery by his brothers, Joseph remained faithful and trusted in God. Additionally, this story shows how God's plan may not be obvious to our limited perspective, but indeed all things work together for the good of those who are called according to his purpose. With everything that was going on with Joseph, God was always one step ahead, and thank goodness he was. Joseph's faith was a blessing to everyone around him. We know that Potiphar prospered through Joseph. Egypt became a great nation because of the wisdom of Joseph. And because of Joseph, God's plan continued. Joseph, you know, there's a lot of times that we get in the way and we do things our way. And it's like God has a perfect plan and we ended up veering off. So now he's got to do something a little different to get us back on track. And that's what I see with the life of Joseph and his brothers. Well, really, you know, with his brothers. Joseph protected his brothers and their families. Joseph was sold into slavery by his jealous brothers and rose to become the second most powerful man in Egypt, next to Pharaoh, where his presence and office caused Israel to leave the famine-stricken Canaan and settle in Egypt. Let us be inspired by the Bible story of Joseph and have faith through our trials, knowing that God will deliver us too. The title Exodus, in the past, I've always right away got into the Exodus story, but the title Exodus comes from a Greek word meaning going out. Your first fill-in is going to be in Roman numeral 1 is Shemot means names in Hebrew. Exodus means going out in Greek. Okay, and the book tells how the Lord set his people, Israel, free from slavery and brought them out of Egypt. In Hebrew, Shemot means names, which is taken from the first verse in Exodus. Now, these are the names of the sons of Israel. You know, it would seem that English and Latin translators who renamed the book of Shemot as the book of Exodus, it would seem on the surface that they got it right, because it's only the first few verses in the Torah portion that speak of names. Then after that, the rest of the book is all about the Exodus. Okay. In fact, it takes up the next 20 plus chapters. Exodus seems like a terrific name for this book, But let's hold on for a minute. Yes, I know the normal answer for the naming of this parashah would be Shemot, or names, because it shows up at the very beginning. And that's how all our other Torah portions start. The names comes from a word at the very beginning of that parashah. But there is something different here. Not only was I reading the Midrash, which I put to the side, and I went to the Humash, and I like the Humash because I like Rashi. Okay. Uh, but there's something different here. And Rashi sees that the beginning of this portion goes much deeper. Okay, like I said, in the past, I've always just jumped right into the Exodus. But today, what I want to do for a little while is cover these first few verses in Exodus. Rashi, for those who have never heard of him, is an 11th century French rabbi and author. Rashi is best known for his works on the commentaries of the Babylonian Talmud, the Bible, Torah. All editions, I found this out, that all editions of the Talmud published since 1520, okay, have included Rashi's commentary. He is well known in the Jewish community and well respected, even though he was back in, he was born in like 1040 or something, and he died in like 1105. Go ahead, Bill. You have a mic? Okay.
I can't remember, did the original scrolls have names?
No,
They
they just rolled on.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it wasn't until we got our hands on everything and and started changing it up. That's good to break it up. It helps us in our understanding and reading. And then plus, when we go back, if you're not a scholar and you know exactly where to go, I mean, you could be opening that Bible, or the scroll. Yeah. Yeah. So Rashi looks at this list of names here in chapter 1 and wonders, why is that list even necessary? Since in Genesis 46:8, it says, now these are the names of the sons of Israel who went to Egypt, Jacob and his sons, and then he names them. Not only are Jacob's sons named, but also names the children of his sons. The wording here in Exodus 1 is almost the same as in Genesis 46. So Rashi says in his commentary that, doesn't this sound repetitious? Well, yes, it does. He goes on to say that God did, and then he answers his own question. That's one thing I like about him. He'll ask a question and then he answers it. He goes on to say and says that God did name them back in the book of Genesis. And now that they have all died, God names them again. They are counted and they are compared to the stars in the sky. When it comes to the stars, God brings them out and he returns them back to their place by number and by name. So Rashi says that God's people are like the stars. And why? Because God loves them. He loves his creation. He loves his people. So stars get named. I don't know about you, but I remember I was contacted that if I wanted to purchase a star, sent $59 and we'll name a star for you. And yeah, you did that for your mom? Yeah. Yeah. Did you get a deal or did you have to pay the $59? Okay. Oh, okay. Oh, what did I do? All right. So the Midrash says to understand the beginning of Exodus, we would need to go back to Abraham. Okay, that is where we will find the children of Israel being compared to stars. In chapter 15, of the book of Genesis, we read that Abraham is worried. Okay, you guys know the story. He is old and does not have an heir from him and his wife. And do you remember how God responds to him? In Genesis 15:5, it says, and he took him outside, and God took him outside and said, now look towards the heavens and count the stars. If you are able to count them, he said to him, so shall your descendants be. God knows every star in heaven and counts and names them. It says that they come out at night, and then during the daytime, so to speak, he puts them back to rest. Okay. The Midrash tells us, like the stars, we too are counted as God's possession, and we are named. We do know that we are going to receive a new name, when we go to be with the Lord. This may be far-fetched, but think about it. God tells Abraham that, like the stars, his descendants will be too numerous to count. I'm going to get to the point here real soon. So digging into this even more, what happens right after the Israelites are counted at the beginning of Exodus? Turn to Exodus 1:7. After the Israelites are counted here at the beginning of Exodus, the next thing we read, there is a population explosion. Exodus 1:7 says, but the sons of Israel were fruitful and increased greatly and multiplied and became exceedingly mighty, so that the land was filled with them. God's prophecy to Abraham has now come to pass. Okay, so Shemot is a perfect name for this Torah portion. God is not only telling us Jacob and his sons and his sons' sons, but he's also telling you that there are many people and he loves them all. Okay, just like the stars, and I think about this because, we have a lot of teachers. We have some teachers in our congregation. And even here at church, when the children go into their Shabbat class, we don't need to put name tags on them because we already know them all by name. And we can just shoot out and say, Asher, or Josiah, settle down, or whatever. We know them all. How much more is it for our God in this whole universe, knowing all his people by name? So he has us counted, and he knows our name. So Shemot, like I said, is a perfect name for this portion. Exodus is good, but I think Shemot is a better title for this portion. Go ahead, Sharon.
Well, it brings to mind Joseph's dreams, when he said the sun and the moon and the stars will all bow down to him. So in that dream, he referenced his brothers, as stars. So it's kind of interesting.
And like I say, usually when I go to this portion, I always jump past 1:1 to 1:7, and then we get on with the Torah portion. But I thought this was interesting. The Midrash had a lot to say about it, and it has a lot of Rashi's comments in there. But also the Humash. If you own a Humash, not only read the portion, but also read the commentary, because it's rich. So we open Exodus right where Genesis left off. Go ahead, Ed. You have microphone? Okay.
Just push the button. I have a question.
Yes, sir.
So we don't really hear it very often anymore, but you used to hear his God-given name. But I'm wondering, does God refer to us by the name he's given us? Because we go by our human given name. Our parents give us our name.
Yep.
So when we're given new names, in the next millennium, do you think it might just be the name that God gave us originally and he
You know-
refers to us? I mean, does he refer to me as Edward or does he refer to me as really the God-given name?
I would say the God-given name. I thought about that too. I don't know I'll probably cover it later, but who named Moses? Who gave Moses his name? Pharaoh's daughter. You would think that Moses is a Hebrew name, but it was Pharaoh's daughter who named him. So I wonder when he went to be with the Lord, is the Lord calling him Moses or is he calling him by his new name? Go ahead,
Yeah, no, I
Kathleen.
was just reminded of the scripture where the Lord called Samuel as a child, but he said Samuel, Samuel,
Yeah. That's
while
right.
he was on earth. But maybe when we go to heaven, then it's the new name.
Yeah. No, that's good.
Would we answer if he was calling us by the God-given name?
Oh, yeah, that's right. That's good. Jailene made a comment. She said, if he called us by our God-given name, would we answer? Oh, he's talking to somebody else,
But he also said, the word also says he knew us before we were placed in the womb. So isn't it magnificent?
Yeah.
Knows us.
Yeah. And I'm glad we get new names because, I'm praying for my great granddaughter because boy, she's got a terrible name. So Lord, give her, bless her. Yeah, her name, they named her something like Persephone, which is the goddess of Hades. And he grew up in Calvary Chapel, but I saw a picture of him the other day and he had pink hair and I'm like, oh my gosh, okay, help us. So we open up Exodus right where we left off, in Genesis. Like I said, Exodus 1-5, along with Jacob, there are 11 sons that went to Egypt, 70 in all, okay? Now, this is where we really got to think about Shemot. There's only 70 that came down. Okay, you're gonna, if it's your immediate family, even the relatives or whatever, I can get with all my kids and, there's 40 of us that are going to be going out to our anniversary dinner. And I know them all by name. Of course I do. And if I had relatives there, I would know them all. So 70 isn't hard. But then, it says that Joseph was already in Egypt. But the 70 arose to over 2 million. So now we got a problem there with names. The only person that I think that would know everybody's name would be the Lord. Okay. And it depends on what commentary that you want to go with, but it's believed that it could be anywhere between 2 million to as many as 4 million people. Go ahead, Sharon.
Well, just another thought. Rashi also compares them not only to the stars, but to the 12 constellations.
Yes.
And I thought that was very interesting. And of course, the wise men who came to worship at Yeshua's feet.
Yeah.
Yeah, when he was a child.
Yeah.
It was through the constellations that they
Right.
knew that the king had been born.
Amen. Amen. Also, there is a debate on how many years were the Israelites living in Egypt. In Genesis 15:13, it says, Abraham is told that his offspring would be aliens in the land not their own, and that will last 400 years. In Exodus 12:40, Moses writes that the time the Israelites were in Egypt was 430 years. So there's 2 points that have to be emphasized here. The rabbis view the 400-year period of Abraham's descendants sojourning began as soon as Isaac was born, okay, since they were in Canaan. They were already sojourners, okay. Isaac and Jacob could be regarded as sojourners in a land that wasn't officially belonged to them. In order to account for the discrepancy between Exodus 12:40 that refers to the 430 years, and Genesis, where it speaks of 400 years, the rabbi suggested that God relayed the prophecy concerning the 400 years to Abraham 30 years before Isaac was born. So you add the 30 into the 400, that voila, there it is, you've got it. And that is, we were talking about it earlier with the Jews, they have an answer for everything. And if you accuse one of the Jews of doing something wrong, no, he wasn't Jewish, or he wasn't Hebrew, or but we'll go from there. Okay, that would make the time in Egypt at about 210 to 215 years. You know what? Let me give you some of the fill-ins. In Roman numeral 2, as in the book of Genesis, here in Exodus 1, Jacob's sons are named again. So sons and named are the fill-ins. In letter A, God compares the Israelites to his stars in the sky. So compares and stars. B, I just gave it to you, huh? That's a freebie. Arrived in Egypt with 70, left Egypt with over 2 million. And then in letter C, time in Egypt was about 210 to 215 years. Okay, so Joseph was taken to Egypt at the age of 17. He was 110 years old when he died. The rabbis say that because Joseph's name is mentioned first, he was the first to die of all his brothers. And as long as any of Jacob's sons were alive, the generation maintained its spiritual level. The spiritual greatness did not fall upon anyone further after all of Jacob's sons had died in Egypt. Go ahead, Sharon.
Just a question. The 2 million or 2 to 4 million, does that include the mixed multitude?
That came out, I would say yes. I've never read anything in a commentary that says that there were 2 million Israelites or 2 million Hebrews, but we do hear that there was a mixed multitude, So later on in other books, we'll read where even Pharaoh's daughter was part of the mixed multitude. So that's interesting. I laugh every time I'm looking at Tila, and I laugh because we were talking earlier. She was telling me that we have a book called the Midrash, and she read it, I read it, and oh my gosh, some of the stuff that's in there, and we'll get to it later on when we get to the 2 righteous women that we'll talk about them. What's that? The midwives. Yep. Okay, the timeline from the death of Joseph to the birth of Moses is about 64 years. So it could have been 50 years or less when we reach what we read in verse 8 of chapter 1. A new king arose in Egypt who did not know Joseph. Now, in that short period of time, do you really think the king did not know Joseph? Putting a question out there. I mean, I know we're reading what the word says, but now here you get the rabbis that come out with their different commentary on this. Go ahead, Janie.
I have heard from some of the historical accounts that I've been made privy to that in the land of Egypt, each time a new Pharaoh came into power, all of time was erased before that Pharaoh. And all events were expunged from the records
Right.
prior to the time of the new Pharaoh. So that could account for the new Pharaoh not knowing
Right,
Joseph. Maybe he wasn't, maybe he just thought that, maybe there were some people that wandered through and they did a few years, 100 years service.
right.
But it could be because he was not trained to know, because of that particular habit, shall I say, or the tradition of erasing everything prior to each new Pharaoh.
No, but that is very interesting, Janie, because I didn't read that. But that's interesting, and that would be a reason, if they're gonna, because it seemed like every time a pharaoh died, they embalmed him, they put him inside a pyramid, and everything and anything he owned, even the people, were put in there with him. So go ahead, Pastor Bruce.
That practice was very common in antiquity. When a new king would come, they would erase everything, and including debt, and the whole financial system would reboot and start over. And that's why the United Nations has been talking about Kisara and Nisara so much lately. Nisara is a national reboot. Gisara is a global reboot, where they just start fresh. And in our modern minds, we can't comprehend how that works, but it's worked throughout all history. It works just fine. And we just can't put the pieces together, the normal person, to figure out, is that even in the realm of reality? So it's very possible that that was just erased from all memory, basically.
Right. No, that is interesting. You know what, the next couple of pages, I won't even have to read because I like that idea better. But go ahead, Ed.
Well, I think it would have to do with the multinational, I mean, like the global reset, the Gasara. I mean, it would just be huge. Whereas like the Chinese, you have dynasties, right?
Yeah.
When a family comes into power, for whether it's 300, 400, 500 years, that would be easy to set, like reset one nation, but to set multiple nations with multiple governments and economic systems, and it just seems pretty huge.
Yeah, that is what the one world, the globalists are working on. And it's one reason it's taking so long. However, 23 nations have already been completely excused of their debt and have rebooted. So it's they're working on it, but it's much more complex than just one nation.
Yeah.
But you have to remember, the globalists, the politics of the globalists is one world. And that's one reason the border issue is so important right now, because they want a borderless. And this is what Europe did several years ago when they went into the European Common Market.
Yeah.
They took 10 nations and they blended all of their money and basically removed borders, at least to some degree.
Right.
So we can see that we're moving in that direction. And now, of course, we're at a place where we're trying to remove the borders around our nation.
Right.
So it's very interesting.
Amen.
Yeah.
Kent wants to say something. Hold on, Kent, let unmute where you're at, because that's what I usually do. Or not only unmute him, you have to turn up your volume. Kathleen has my computer and yeah.
Okay. Talk.
Okay, go ahead, Kent.
But it's normal when a new entity takes control. I mean, if you read in the Bible, Biden is the president and he did not know Trump, everybody would laugh. Of course he didn't know Trump. So a new entity, a new commander takes control. It's normal. They absolutely don't follow the old reign of the old rule.
Right. No, and that's good, because that's exactly what's going on here.
Yeah, and the word here, did not know, is the word yada, and we've talked a lot about that Hebrew word. Yada means to know intimately. So he obviously knew the history of the nation, but he
Yeah.
didn't, just like I know all about George Washington,
Right.
but I never knew him.
Yeah.
So that's the context.
Okay, I was gonna go a different route because I asked that question, do you really think that the king did not know of Joseph? Or was he anti-Semitic? There are two thoughts here, that the new king actually did know who Joseph was. And the second thought is the new king or Pharaoh decrees or rulings were new. That's what we're talking about right now. Rashi says, since the Torah does not say the king of Egypt died and a new king arose, it implies that the old king was still alive, only that his policies had changed and he acted like a new king. We get a hint that the new king actually did know who Joseph was when we read verse 11. It seems like the policies brought forward from Joseph, they were still being used. You know, the store places or the storehouses, you know, that they're still being used. Well, who built them? Well, Joseph had them built. Okay. The Israelites built storage cities for Pharaoh. So why is it that now the Egyptians did not like the Hebrews? The first hint to the Egyptians not wanting anything to do with the Hebrews is the separation to where the Hebrews were living. Oh my gosh, I keep hitting that thing.
I tried earlier to build it down.
What, the web, the
Internet.
internet? Yeah. Okay, like I said, the first hint is the Hebrews is a separation where the Hebrews were living. They had their own land and could not mingle with their neighbors. Also, shepherds. One thing you have to understand, shepherds were frowned on in Egypt. Okay. So they were looked down upon by the Egyptians, and that's exactly what the Hebrews were. They were shepherds. The Humash says that throughout the history, this is a familiar pattern of anti-Semitism. The Jews are too dangerous to keep, and they are too important to lose. So Pharaoh's solution is to make slaves of them. Yeah, yeah. He was going to make slaves of them. Other rabbis say that the Israelites they actually did assimilate with Egypt, and they prospered. The Egyptians were jealous of this. Isn't this what happened in Europe? In Germany, okay, the Jews rose to the highest ranks of society. They were free and they prospered. They built synagogues and yeshivas. Many Jews called themselves German, like everyone else. They weren't referred to as Jews. They referred to themselves as being German. So everything was going very well until a new king arose who did not know Joseph, and his name was Adolf Hitler. History has not been kind to the Jews, okay? When the Jews prospered in Portugal and in Spain, the kings took notice of that, okay? And they didn't like it. They were forced to convert, be expelled, or even be killed. They had three choices: convert to Catholicism, leave the country, or be killed. So that's why even now today, we're finding a lot of people that when they go do their ancestry, they find out that generations ago that their families were actually Jewish, that they were actually Jews. Even here in America, the Jews are a thriving people. They own industries, they are doctors, lawyers, politicians, etc. The problem is history repeats itself. Okay, already you all know that college campuses are spewing out hatred of Israel. Okay, you have politicians who hate Israel. I will never understand, I've shared this before, how American Jews can vote for politicians who hate Jews. And it happens all the time. It happened in the last election. They must be sold out to their party. Their party comes before God. Go ahead, Bill.
I think it's really interesting, though, that 90% of Orthodox Jews voted for Trump. And you won't read it in the media,
Yeah.
that he just got that huge reward from the Orthodox Jews. You remember what the name of it was? It was like,
Yeah.
well, not the, it was like a massive friend of Israel.
Yeah, just,
Yeah.
just,
I can't remember the name of it.
yeah, I don't remember.
But you know, Bill, you're right.
It's liberal Jews that have.
That have strayed away. And you're absolutely right. And what's the difference between the Orthodox Jews and the liberal Jews? Well, the Orthodox Jews, they have their nose in Torah and they see this. And if somebody is anti-Torah, well, they're not going to support that person or party, you know. But it's amazing, all these liberal Jews, even TV personalities and everything that come out, and then you find out they are Jewish, but yet they don't like anything that God is doing, you know. So twice in both verse 7 and verse 9, we read how the children of Israel were becoming too numerous. Pharaoh was afraid that if there was a war, the Israelites would join their enemies and fight against Egypt, even though the Israelites were in Egypt for well over 100 years. You know, there's stories, there's some wonderful stories out there where, we have people that they're transplanted into the United States. Their families have come out here. They were raised as Americans, and they're American, through and through. They get into the service, Army, Navy, or whatever. And if we go against another nation, and it could be a nation even of their generation, of generations ago, of their own people, they're American, so that happens. It's unfortunate, like when back in the 40s, when they encamped the Japanese, and there were a lot of them that were in the service. And
his nephew was in our
army. Yeah. So unfortunately, things happen certain ways, and other times too. I mean, our armed forces are made up of immigrants, a lot of people coming into this country and being raised here. Okay, well, in verse 15, we come to the second important verse. It says let's read verse 15-17. Then the king of Egypt spoke to the Hebrew midwives, one of whom was named Shiphrah, and the other was named Puah. And he said, when you are helping the Hebrew women to give birth and see them upon the birth stool, if it is a son, then you shall put him to death. But if it's a daughter, then she shall live. But the midwives feared God and did not do as the king of Egypt had commanded, but they did let the boys live. He tried first putting them into slavery, and that didn't work. So his final solution was, we're just going to kill them. Final solution. Does that sound familiar? Yeah. Okay, let's go. Letter D, Pharaoh comes to power. A Pharaoh comes to power who did not know Joseph. The fill-ins are Pharaoh and No. And then in number 1, the Israelites increased greatly during their slavery. And that's amazing, to be in slavery, and he's thinking that the numbers are going to dwindle, but the numbers exploded. Okay. In number 2, the Pharaoh was afraid that the Hebrews would side with the enemies of Egypt. And in number 3, the Egyptians set taskmasters, imposed hardships, made life miserable for the Hebrew people. So impose and miserable. And I'll stop right there. If you guys don't get something you out in Zoom land and you need an answer, Kathleen could post it for you. Okay. Okay, now we see what Pharaoh's true intention is. He would like nothing more than to exterminate the Israelites. We are now introduced to two real heroes after this in the Torah. How many of you have ever heard of Shiphrah and Puah? Okay, and that's because of the Torah portions that we constantly go through every year. They were two midwives who delivered the children of the Israelites. According to the rabbi, Shiphrah and Puah were actually Moses' mother and sister. So it was Yocheved and Miriam. Others say that Shiphrah and Puah were non-Hebrew midwives. In verse 15 can be read, the Hebrew midwives. And if the different vowels are used, and if the vowels are used in a different way in Hebrew, it could also read the midwives of the Hebrew women. And it's because of that there are some who believe that they were actually Egyptian. But either way, they would not do what Pharaoh would do. But the name Shiphrah and Puah are Hebrew names. So the thought is the two women, they must be Hebrew. Okay, because history would tell us that Egyptians would not give their children Hebrew names. So I think that tells us right there too. But others argue that why would Pharaoh ask two Hebrew women to kill Hebrew children?
Good question.
He would not put his trust into these two women to carry out his decree. Josephus suggests that they are Egyptians because of this thought. So if Shiphrah and Puah were Egyptian, then what were their motivation to not do as their king said? It would seem that their motives were pure, but just did not want to kill. They just did not want to kill babies, because later on we're going to read where Pharaoh says, kill any boy that's born in Egypt. So, and when I read this, even now that we are associated with Give Life? Love Life ministry. I think it's wonderful what all the people are doing there, and it's not just women. There's a lot of men down there, and so it's great. I pray that every doctor in America would be like these two women and say no to abortion. It's just not right. Rashi feels that there were only these two midwives for all the people, while others say that they were the leaders of maybe over 500 midwives. That seems more realistic. But one thing that Tila and I were reading this week is they're saying that if Miriam was one of the midwives, she would have been 5 years old at this time, so, and the rabbis get around it by saying that she was just helping her mother, being called but she's called a midwife. Go ahead, Tila.
Well, no, the other thing that I read was that Yocheved would have been 126 years old. How could she be 126 and have Miriam be 5?
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many crazy things that was being said in that,
Yeah.
and Shiphrah means fair and Puah means splendid.
Right.
So I thought that was, I like names. I like to see what the names. So again, they're Hebrew names. I just can't imagine
Right. But you know, it's like anything else, I guess you have to dissect it or go in there and read it because some stuff is really crazy. But I like to share it because I want you to know what a lot of these rabbis are writing, you know, you be the judge, you know. Okay, then Pharaoh confronts the two midwives and demands an explanation. In verse 19, Pharaoh is told by the midwives, because the Hebrew women are not like the Egyptian women, for they are vigorous and give birth before the midwives can get to them. But you know, the word vigorous has a meaning in Hebrew that means beast of the field. Okay, so they told Pharaoh that the Israelite women are like the beast and give birth before they arrive. What we do know about these two women, is that they feared God more than they feared Pharaoh. We could learn a lot from that. These two women were blessed by God himself. The first reward was the success of the nation of the Israelites. And secondly, it says that God made them houses in verse 20. So he supplied for them. He rewarded them. Okay, in Roman numeral 3, Shiphrah and Puah, two righteous and brave women of God. And in letter A, were they, I asked the question, were they Hebrew or Egyptian? In B, they both feared no one but God. And then what we're going to read what you would read later is they would not kill Hebrew or Egyptian babies. Go ahead, Bill.
This contribution means little, so I won't charge you, but when
Thank
Sharon
you.
and I were working in Baja, the surgeon down there, I made a comment that, well, how come all the Oaxacan Indians and the Mixteco, why do they all get C-sections? In the hospital, they're all getting C-sections. He said, well, that's about 0.5% of the women. Everybody has their babies at home.
Oh,
It's just the
okay.
ones that are difficult show up at his door.
Right.
So they're living in these little huts with no running water, no bathrooms.
Right.
They have to walk up, 10 by 10, and they're delivering their own babies. So I think a lot of times as Westerners,
Yeah.
it's really hard. What are they talking about?
Yeah.
I would call those hardy women.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
Oaxacans and
You know,
Mixteco women.
And I never thought about that. And you're right. You know, you go into a lot of these third world countries and, you know, they're having children and they don't have hospitals. You know, go ahead, Kathleen.
Isn't it really only in the last maybe 100 or more years that babies have been born in hospitals? Because I believe hearing my great grandmother had all her kids at home. So isn't that more of a today thing? I don't
Right.
know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or Western too.
Or Western.
Yeah. And it probably started in what, about maybe the 1940s or something like that, when they started going to hospitals
They
or.
really didn't have a lot of hospitals.
No, because I know that my mother was born at home, but she had all her 14 kids at hospitals, you know, so yeah, so how things change. Okay, in doing the study on Shiphrah and Puah, I read that there used to be a fragment of a text from the Cairo, it's called the Cairo Geniza, Geniza, which is a collection of manuscripts from a synagogue in Cairo that dated back to as far as 870 CE. That says Shiphrah and Puah were Egyptian. It's a list of righteous Gentiles, and also on that list were Hagar and Zipporah. So that's just, I don't know how true that is, but if you want to look it up, it's the Cairo, Cairo, Genza, Geniza. Go ahead, Sharon.
I think that's the title they did give to President Trump, a righteous Gentile, wasn't
The
it?
righteous Gentile?
Yeah.
I think it was.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Oh, I don't know.
Okay, the fragment was lost or stolen, but the list remains. Would so we have to think, were they Egyptian or were they Hebrew? But like I said, but in any case, their conviction or their love for God, and that's probably why when Sharon brought up earlier, does that include the mixed multitude? Because there are people, when you find out something is right, why are you going to continue to do what's wrong? And these two women, they knew it wasn't right, to kill babies. Boy, they're a lot smarter than a lot of people today. So no, it's very sad. And like I said, I just don't understand how these people that are Jewish can vote for politicians or people that are anti-Semitic, or Semitic. They're just, they don't like the Jews. In verse 22, Pharaoh now commands the entire nation of Egypt to kill every male child, to throw them in the river. He figured, I guess, that if they throw their own children into the river, then maybe the Jews will throw theirs too. I don't know. But then we go to chapter 2. This chapter begins with the story of one family. Pharaoh had a decree to kill every boy baby. A man of the house of Levi marries a Levite woman. It is important to establish from the beginning that Moses derives from a priestly family. One thing I read, that all the Jews in Egypt became slaves except one tribe, the Levites. And it's said because when they approached the Levites, that they too had to go out and make brick and everything. They said, we are too busy studying Torah. We'll do it after we're done studying Torah. They'd come back again. We are too busy studying Torah. So then it got to the point where they just stopped going after the Levites. They were the only group or only tribe that did not have to go out as slaves and work. Go ahead, Sharon.
Well, just going back to Shifra and Tua, that, it says that God provided houses, but I think that means families and heirs more than a physical dwelling place.
It probably does. You're right, because they were blessed with a big family. I think about myself. When I think of big families, I think about and I tell people I love it. I just love it. I was showing everybody a picture on my phone of my two granddaughters. One is 10 months and the other one is 2 years old. And I was telling them, they love their grandpa so much. They heard their grandma's voice upstairs. And so I show them the picture and they're both at the gate, one of those baby gates, and they're both at the gate like this. Grandma! They had enough of grandpa. We're going with grandma. Oh, they do. But and it was nice this past Shabbat. We had Nicole for the first time. Nicole is a member of our congregation down in Redlands, and she wants to teach the children. She comes out of a background of teaching Sunday school. So now that she's with us, she wants to teach Shabbat school. So she was in the class, and the kids loved her. Oh, I think it took 5 minutes and they all gravitated to her and, oh, she's a sweetie. Yes, she is. And she was there helping them, helping everybody, especially helping little Lucy. Lucy is a sweetheart.
Nicole was very excited to be doing that, she told me.
Oh, okay, good. I could tell she was enjoying it. So, okay. So we're going to talk about, the priest, he comes from a priestly family, Moses. His parents will be named later on. If you notice, there are no names being given at this time. But for now, they are simply introduced as being from the tribe of Levi or Levi. They have a baby and it's a boy. Normally, this would be a time of great joy, but they have to keep that excitement hidden because they have a son. Despite this reality, the mother says something that is very interesting. The literal translation of the Hebrew is, she saw him that he was good. Some translations render this as being a fine child or a goodly child, but the words are, he is good.
Beautiful.
Beautiful, okay.
But the Hebrews go.
Yeah, good. Yeah, tov. It appears that she hides him because he is good. No one believed this relates to his physical appearance or his behavior as a small child. Scholars have noted that this phrase has been used many times in the Genesis story of creation. 7 times the text states, God saw that it was good. It is impossible to hear the statement of Moses' mother and not to hear, and that's the way it was with me. When I read this, I thought the first thing that came to mind was the Exodus story every time, and it was good. Thus far in Exodus, God has only been mentioned in the context of the midwives. Okay, as far as the Israelites are concerned, this seems to be a story of escalating oppression. Okay, first there is slavery, then there is the slaughter, and then it's getting worse. One might reasonably ask, where is God in all this? God is right there. I think even the Hebrews, with their crying out to the Lord, that's what they were asking. God, where are you? Help us, but you know what? God was helping them. You know how he was helping them too? They were fruitful. Even with all of this that was going on, they were very fruitful and they multiplied. So let's move on. When she could not hide him any longer, she got a basket for him and plastered it with clay and pitch. Now, what are you thinking of when you read this? The ark, exactly. The particular Hebrew word that is used for the basket only occurs twice in the whole Bible. Okay, here and for Noah's ark. Okay, in both cases, clay is used to waterproof the ark. What is Noah's ark except a life-saving vehicle for Noah and his family? In like manner, this little ark will be a life-saving vessel for Moses. So in both cases, the ark is totally dependent upon God's protection. And if you notice, there's other similarities. There's no steering mechanism or sails or a captain to move it along. It's just there in the water and the current is going to take it away. So she puts a child in it, placed it among the reeds on the banks of the river, and let no one forget that the basket is placed among the reeds of the Nile, the Egyptians' killing ground, the place where all male babies are to be drowned. And that's where Moses was placed. After his mother places him among the reeds, his sister stands at a distance to see what would happen to him. She will also be, and even now, there is no name there. Okay. She will also be named, we'll find out later. So she remains nameless. Sometime, the daughter of Pharaoh comes down to bathe at the river while her attendants walk beside the river. She is not named either, but her relationship to Pharaoh is made very clear. Okay. As his daughter, she should above all, wouldn't you think, be loyal to her father's wishes? You know, you would think so, turn the basket over, you know. What's that? Teenager? Yeah. Yeah. Rebellious teenager, yeah. When she sees the basket among the reeds, she sends her maids or her servants to go out to bring it. When she opens it, she sees a child. He is crying and she takes pity on him. Okay, she presumes from the outset that this must be a Hebrew child. There are things that are going to give it away. The cloths that are being used, they were Hebrew. The other thing is, even at this point, I was reading in a commentary because I know that there was a decree that went out from Pharaoh that they could not circumcise their children. Okay, but it says the Levites were continuing to circumcise their children. So if she saw the baby and the baby was circumcised, well, there it is, What's that? Moses? Yeah, oh, that's right, he wasn't. Well, no, it was his boys that he had to do.
Oh,
No. Yeah. No, it was his boys. Yeah, his sons. Okay, so that suggests she knows about her father's decree, though it is true that an unwanted child would oftentimes be put outside in the hopes that somebody would find the child. But in this case, though, I would say the cloth on Moses probably identified him as being a Hebrew child. Her quick assessment of the baby suggests that he might be hungry. Springing into action, the baby's sister appears from among the reeds and says to Pharaoh's daughter, "Shall I go and get you a nurse from the Hebrew women to nurse the child for you?" Without comment on the sudden appearance. And that's what would get me. Boy, where'd you come from? How long have you been there, spying on me or something, but Pharaoh's daughter says to her, yes. So the girl runs off and calls the child's mother. Indeed, Pharaoh's daughter says to his mother, take this child and nurse it for me, and I will give you your wages. Okay, so the woman takes the child and nurses it. While the child is weaned, his mother brings him back to Pharaoh's daughter, and she raises him as her own. Okay, and this is where she names him. Later on, when he becomes her son, Pharaoh's daughter names him. This is another indication how very important names are. And it further serves to emphasize the writer's intent to keep Pharaoh and his daughter nameless. She names him Moses because she drew him out of the water, And we go through the whole story of Moses, and like I said, she named him Moses, It wasn't Jochebed who named her son. And I've always wondered, I wonder if she did name her son, but we're not privy to it, But okay, so let's see. In Roman numeral 4, Moses lived 40 years in Pharaoh's household. 40 is your fill-in. In letter A, his birth father and mother were from the tribe of Levi. In letter C, Pharaoh's daughter will raise Moses as her own son. Some scholars have skeptically wondered why Pharaoh's daughter would have had the authority to do any of this. While it is true that no one knows exactly which pharaoh this is, the scholars point out that Ramesses II, and that was from 1279 to 1213 BCE, had 59 daughters.
Wow.
Egyptian, a lot of, not from one wife. Uh, Go ahead, Bill, before we move on.
Another no charge comment. This is one of the problems too, studying history like this, and I'm no expert on that, but like archaeology.
Yeah,
For many, many years, they said there's no proof of Joseph. Outside of the Bible, many archaeologists wouldn't accept. Well, there was two Ramses,
yeah.
and they were searching in the area of the first Ramses, and then
Thank you, Sharon.
future expeditions, they found in second Ramses, if I recall correctly, 12 tombs,
Yep,
including one that was like or it was 13. Is it 13?
it was 12.
Including one that looked like a pyramid, and although empty, it was, because we know the story. But there was just like, why are there 12 kind of ordinary tombs and this one shaped like a, pyramid, kind of majestic?
Right.
So all of a sudden, after maybe hundreds of years of denial that there's no proof of Joseph, they find, well, maybe it was Ramses II
Yeah.
they were talking about.
It may have been, but I remember the archaeologists' findings that, well, what I saw, and it's like the gentleman who just came out with the timeline, and he fixed the timeline, and then it made sense, with his study. But also they found this much larger tomb. They found 11 tombs that were small, but then they found this one big one, and in there they found pottery that had multicolors in it, and they believe that's where Joseph was laid to rest, but they didn't find any bones in that tomb. Well, because Joseph said, "Hey, take my bones out of here," So there was things like that this gentleman would bring up. But it seemed like he worked for years and years going from one place to another, and he started putting everything together. And he says, our problem by our Western minds today is we aren't thinking this through and through. It wasn't the pharaoh that they really thought it was. This happened, was it like 200 years before, something like that? Yeah. I can't remember it too, but I saw that too. It was a couple hundred years, and then things started making sense.
Just a question again.
You got it.
Well, I know historically there was a pharaoh that left the beliefs of all the different gods, and he was a monotheist, became a monotheist. He changed the capital and where he lived to a totally different place. I don't think he was very popular because of his beliefs, and you wonder, well, was it because of the Hebrews that he came to this conclusion there was only one God? And when did he live? Was it
Right.
during the Exodus or when?
Right.
On a Hephaestus, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting. And like I said, if I would remember the name that, in fact, we went to the theater and watched it. It was one of those like one-time showings.
Oh, that's it.
Was it? I think it was like, oh, was it? I didn't, no, it was Exodus. It had to do with the Exodus. And we went, I remember going into River. Yeah, oh, they did, okay. I went to Riverside, to one of the theaters there with a lot of different people, and we watched it. It was good, But let's the next several incidents happen to Moses in adult life. The first one is that he goes out and sees an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, and he looks around and And what he does is he sticks up for the Hebrew, but by sticking up for him, he ended up killing the Egyptian. And he has the Egyptian, well, the Egyptian is buried in the sand. You know, he is not authorized to intervene in this way, even as Pharaoh's adopted son. The reality of the situation is that an Egyptian would never have gotten into trouble for beating a slave, regardless of the circumstances. Scholars conclude that this incident indicates a compassionate nature in the face of any injustice. His hiding of the body, however, has led to further speculation. Clearly, he knows he has done something wrong. This provides a hint that all is not well between Moses and the Pharaoh. While he has been raised as an Egyptian in Pharaoh's household, scholars believe he must have been aware of his dual heritage. There is no suggestion that Moses identified as a Hebrew. While he was living with Pharaoh, he did not identify as a Hebrew, but something in his adult life was changing him. He has realized, and I would imagine that a lot of the people in Pharaoh's court were really leery of him. And there's in the Midrash, it talks about the three what call them, seer or sorcerers that Pharaoh had. One of them was Jethro, which would be his father-in-law, and he gave the Pharaoh advice, and the Pharaoh didn't like the advice. He took off and he got to Midian as soon as he could, you know, so he would not be killed. The second one, I know it started with the Ayad, but he too didn't give Pharaoh really good advice. The one that they gave him the most of the advice, we'll meet him later on in his own parashah, and that was Balaam. Balaam was one of Pharaoh's advisors, and he's the one who advised him to throw the babies into the Nile and kill them. He advised them that in your household there is a Hebrew that is going to conquer you. You know, so this is all in the Midrash, you know, so a lot of this you know, is going on behind the scenes. It's not you won't find that in the Bible. Okay. Let's see. Okay, then the very next day he goes out again and he sees a Hebrew beating another Hebrew. And he says to one who is in the wrong, "Why do you strike your fellow Hebrew?" It's a tragedy when the Israelites are assaulted by their oppressors, but it's far worse when they fight against each other, you know. And the man tells him, "Who made you ruler and judge over us? Do you mean to kill me as you killed the Egyptian?" Okay. It is too much to assume that the Israelites see Moses as a future savior of his people, but the rejection of his leadership will become all too common now. Okay. In this way, his rejection, or Pharaoh's rejection of him, and his knowledge of being a Hebrew, it is all come to light now. Okay. But now he realizes that his secret is out. People know, indeed, when Pharaoh finds out, he is going to kill Moses. With his life in danger, Moses flees. He goes to the land of Midian because the Midianites are a nomadic people. No one knows exactly where this is, but it's definitely beyond the Egyptian borders. At this time, I mean, we do know where Midian is, you know, and it's not right across the Red Sea where people believe that the Red Sea is today. You know, you've got to go even further. In fact, there were two main highways at that time. They had they had a highway that would lead from Egypt and it would go along the coast, the Mediterranean coast, the Via Maris. And it would go right along, and that is a short route to get to present day Israel. There was another route that went east to west, and the eastern route would take you all the way into like into Midian and to go into that area. Go ahead, Pastor Bruce.
Yeah, that was the Wilderness
The
Highway.
Wilderness Highway, that's right.
And that is the road that went through the Valley of the Travelers that I talked about at Sukkot.
Mm.
And that's the road that the travelers would take up to Mount Hermon,
Uh-huh.
the demonic personages.
Are they still there in this state? Those two routes?
Yeah, the two routes are still, they're
Yeah.
still there. Yep. Now they are major highways. Yeah. But, you know, but I've also, I've wondered, I know that they had all these leaders at Mount Sinai. Which Mount Sinai? Was it the one in Saudi Arabia
Oh, they were in Egypt.
In Egypt.
or in Egypt? Okay,
But they can actually meet on the mountain 50 miles away.
yeah. So, okay, and then at that time, understand this, that Saudi Arabia was actually Egypt at that time. It was, you can even call it an Egyptian territory or whatever, but they were the conqueror. They were the big people at the empire at that time. So that land there was also theirs. So where they say they crossed the Red Sea, they would have crossed the Red Sea and been right back in Egypt. That doesn't make any sense. But then on the other side of the Sinai, what's that, the peninsula, or what do they call it? If you go on the other side and it's the Sea of Aqaba,
Yeah, where Yemen is today.
yeah. If you cross there, well, you're out of Egypt, you know, so that makes more sense. In fact, in that program, they were talking about that. Okay, so and it's east of the Sinai Peninsula. He is probably about 40 years old now and will spend the next 40 years in Midian. Going to Midian provides many connections to the patriarchs. Midian is one of Abraham's sons by Keturah, okay? His wife after Sarah had died. The Midianites transported Joseph to Egypt, okay, so many centuries ago. Both Moses and Jacob flee to a faraway land, meet their wives at a well, and go home to their father's house. So there's a lot of little comparisons. And of course, fleeing Egypt foreshadows the Exodus. Later on, there will be many conflicts between the Israelites and the Mennonites, but for now they embrace Moses and they play a significant role in his life. So, and we get to the end of chapter 2 here. Okay, so I gave you Roman numeral what? 4? Okay, did I give you all of it?
No.
We're in D, okay. So in D, Moses, 40 years in Egypt, 40 years in Midian, 40 years leading the Israelites in the wilderness. He lived 120 years, 40, 40, and 40 at different stages. You know, we're going to get into chapter 3 right now, but in Roman numeral 4, there's the very first fill-in. Moses was happy living in Midian. You know, if Moses would have just lived there the rest of his life with his wife and his 2 sons, he would have been a happy camper. But God had other things for him. So, but I just wanted you to know that he was happy there. Okay. In chapter 3, in Exodus chapter 3, we are told that Moses kept the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian. Moses was a shepherd in the land of Midian for the past 40 years, ever since he fled Egypt. Okay. The 2 periods of Moses' life, the 40 years in the palace and 40 years in the desert tending sheep, actually prepared him for the final 40 years of his life as Israel's deliverer. Taking care of, I guess, taking care of sheep is kind of like pastoring. Yeah, go ahead,
Well,
there,
I guess
Bill.
Maria's not here. We're moving much too fast. 11:30. So I'll see if I can slow it down a little. Again, most of my comments seem trivial, but today. So, but when I've used this story before. Shepherds would be kind of like the equivalent of Navy SEALs today. And we see these little shepherd kids down in Bob Airport running through the cactus, running to keep up their sheep or to get a sheep that, went stray. I mean, that 8-year-old kid, I don't think I'd want to wrestle, but even though I was in pretty good shape back then, and everything, because they're just in super good shape. So we kind of have this, again, Western idea of what it is to be a shepherd, but it's nothing like anything most of us have ever experienced. So you're moving through the desert, you're trying to keep up with these things, you're trying to defend them from wolves. So that's probably what prepared Moses for the job ahead. He was even at 8 years old, he was very strong.
Yeah.
His eye was not dim. Moses?
That was Moses. Yep, that
Okay.
was Moses. Yeah. And he was probably about 118 when he killed, he's the one that they say killed the giant King Og, or whatever. He was the one. And that was right before they went into the promised land, the people. So he had to be about 118 or so.
Of course, that's David's pedigree too.
Yeah.
So God, it's kind of interesting that maybe God's allowed that.
Yeah. It's odd how that when you're talking about these kids down there running around barefoot, we were talking about that yesterday. And I tell people, I said, the problem with Peggy is if we get sick from our grandchildren, she carries it for at least 2 weeks. I carry it for 24 hours and it's gone. And but I grew up like that. I grew up, I stepped on many pieces of glass and nails and, you name it, drinking water from the water hose and just, pulling oranges from the tree and just eating them and, apples and, just doing, apricots, you got it. So I think all that has prepared me for for that too, but you think about it, some of these kids down there, they live to a ripe old age and they don't have all this vaccinations and everything else, yeah. So they've got that natural immune system. So I was going to talk about this. Moses fully believed with his faith in God of his ancestors. But how would he, with his, he's an intelligent man. Somebody had to speak to him about his actual people and, his priestly role that from the tribe that he came from, because he was raised in the house of Pharaoh and they're not going to talk about it. Now he's in Midian with Jethro and he's a priest. What type of priest is he? So I've always thought about that. He's going to come back and rescue his people, but boy, it speculates, or it says that he knew about his own people. He knew about their history. And I wonder, well, how would he have known that? Maybe when his mother was nursing him, but it says she handed him back over at a young age. So, okay, now turn in Acts 7, and I'm going to read verses 23 and 25. It says, when Moses was 40 years old, he decided to visit his own people, the Israelites. In 24, it says, he saw one of them being mistreated by an Egyptian, so he went to his defense and avenged him. So like I said, at 40, he already knew his own people, the Israelites. So that's why I speculate, how much of it does he know? Or Now we pay a close attention to verse 25. It says, Moses thought that his own people would realize that God was using him to rescue them, but he did not, but they did not. It was a thought and desire of Moses to help his own people from way back. God knew the desire of Moses's heart. God gave him the gift of caring for others and eventually caring for God's people. Now we know why he's the most humble man in all of the Bible. In the same sense, our life experiences have often prepared us for the Lord's work. Remember, God calls those who are doing something pleasing in his eyes. Moses was a busy shepherd who was faithful in his calling, and he did a good job. God then uses Moses to shepherd his people. I bring this up because of the fact that a lot of us, we've all had our different, why me, Lord? Why did, I'm one of 14 kids. I do have a brother who's a Foursquare pastor, and there's probably, I've got 3 other siblings beside him that they are in church, but that's only like 5 out of 14, but when I think about this, I think about with myself, he saw something in me that yanked me out of the garbage and set me on a different path. Praise God. And I think all of you could probably share in a story like that, like, oh my gosh, going one direction and now we're going up, So like Moses, believers need to be faithful with the smaller tasks that God gives us to do, because it's actually the stepping stone for our heart's desire to answer God's call for our lives. Okay, sometime after reaching Midian, Moses marries Zipporah, the daughter of Jethro, the priest of Midian. The area known as Midian had no definite borders at that time, but it was, like I said, it was east of the Sinai Peninsula. So at the beginning of Exodus 3, it says that Moses was pasturing the flock of his father-in-law Jethro, the priest of Midian. And he led the flock to the west side or the back side of the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. Most scholars say that Horeb is another name for Sinai. And in Exodus 3, it is called the mountain of God. Is that what you guys have in Exodus 3? Okay. The backside of the desert is the west side of the desert. The Semite people are descendants of Shem, both Arabs and Jews, always considered the east as the forward direction, okay? Later, it becomes a place where God would give the law to Israel, okay, in Exodus 19, 1 through 8, and in Exodus 20, 1 through 17. Some say that the location of Mount Horeb is uncertain, and that the site tourists visit is Jebel Musa, which means mountain of Moses, but it's located at the south of the Sinai Peninsula, and that is more of a Catholic thing. That is, when Constantine sent his mother out to find all these sites, she found this site, and he gave his stamp of approval. And I know that if you go to Israel, there's a lot of sites there that are very accurate. In fact, they are accurate. But then there's other sites that make you think, like, why'd they pick this place? And this is one of those. Okay. Also, after Moses led the Israelites to this mountain, later on, they apparently paid little attention to its location because there is only one other recorded visit to Horeb, and that was by Elijah in 1 Kings 19:8. That was when he tried to escape He went to escape and he escaped to Mount Horeb. Okay. Okay, now we come to the burning bush and it gets Moses' attention in Exodus chapter 3, verses 2-3. Let's look at verse 2. It says, and the angel of the Lord appeared unto him in a flame of fire out of the midst of the bush. And he looked, and behold, the bush burned with fire, but the bush was not consumed. Okay, we read further in Exodus 3:4, it says, angel of the Lord. Was it a manifestation of God himself? And that, well, we call that what, a theophany? Which means a visible manifestation of a deity. Go ahead, Bill.
We got 20 minutes left. Okay, I got charged for this comment.
Okay,
I know I'm kind of like a broken record here, but
it's all right. I'm gonna give you a donut.
what was his name? Stuart Darwin once said, a lot of times, and it's not true here, but a lot of times in Messianic circles, we don't know what to do with Yeshua. He's kind of get the side seat, we're not, but he's all through the Old Testament.
Yes, he is.
And one of the things, although we struggle because of our upbringing, I believe, to define this this God of ours, in Acts, it's pretty clear the Holy Spirit can't coexist with Yeshua.
Mhm.
Remember, Yeshua had to leave for the Holy Spirit, here on earth. And I know I've been hammered for this before, but when an angel accepts worship, that's a
That's a no-no. Yeah.
it's a big no-no. And so we see it when Josh, I didn't bring my Bible, unfortunately, but Joshua, I believe it's chapter 5, take your shoes, your sandals off, you're on holy ground, act of worship. We see that same thing here.
Right.
And then to tie it all together, I'm trying to prove Yeshua in the Old Testament, which I know a lot of us agree with or don't disagree with.
Right.
But proving it when somebody, and then I think it's Zephaniah 11, one of my favorites now, which I didn't see for years. It says, look at the price that you sold me for, or look at the price you valued me at, 40 pieces of silver, 30. So there's God speaking first person about the coming crucifixion. And I don't believe when you see it, Colossians 1:18, his hand holds all things together. I believe that's literal. He's a strong nuclear force. I'm not sure we're ever going to see God the Father. Revelation, it's a really weird scene there in chapter 6.
Right.
And so this God the Father, no, I don't believe that Moses could have gotten close.
Right.
And it's not Jesus who was born in, this is where we get hung up. The baby was born. This is a pre-incarnate, the way I look at it now, it's a pre-incarnate appearance of Yeshua. He accepted worship. Yeah, I hate to use second person, third person, all that stuff, because it brings us back to that word, the Trinity, which is part of our stumbling block.
Right.
But here, this, okay, here's an angel accepting worship. Well, what is angel? Ministering spirit. Doesn't necessarily mean, they certainly don't have wings. I still have that argument with my grandkids, but this to me is an pre-incarnate appearance. You don't want to call him Yeshua at this point of the Godhead.
Well, let me point blank out. Do you think it was Yeshua?
Oh yeah,
I do too.
how you define that though is where it gets a
Well,
little sticky.
you know what? I didn't put down the verse in the Brit Hadashah, but let's go to verse 4. God calls out Moses. It says, and when the Lord saw that he turned aside to see, God called unto him in the midst of the bush and said, Moses. And Moses said, he said, here I am. And then it goes on, and when the Lord saw that he turned aside to see, means God now has Moses' undivided attention. Well, then it goes on, and he says, well, do you remember when he said, who should I say sent me? And he says, I am that I am sent you. Okay, Well, when he went before the leaders of the Levites, of his people in Egypt, and he says, I am that I am, it got their attention.
To the point they wanted to kill him.
Well, I don't know if they wanted to kill him, but it got their attention. I'm not talking about Yeshua. I'm talking about Moses.
Oh.
Moses, he got their attention because they knew exactly how would this man, who wasn't even raised here, with the Levite priests and everything, how would he know I am that I am is a personal name of Almighty God? So they knew who he was talking about. Now, if you jump all the way over into the Brit Hadashah, Yeshua's talking, and he calls himself, I am that I am. And then, like you said, they wanted to kill him because they knew exactly what he was saying. He was referring to himself as being God, or the Son of God.
And that can be a trap, for some people. You can kind of nitpick the language there,
Uh-huh.
and it kind of, you got to just be aware that can be a trap, but the Hebrew, as I remember, says, I have been, not I am, but I have been.
I will be.
I will be,
whatever I will
yeah.
be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in general, when you get the translation problem out of the way, to me, Yeshua is claiming that same statement that was made in the bush.
Yeah, he's claiming the same statement. So my understanding is if somebody would ask me point blank, like I asked you, was it Yeshua? Yes, it was. Yes, it was. Because with what he said in the Brit Hadashah, like I said, they didn't want to kill him because they just didn't like him. They wanted to kill him because he was making reference that he is God. So, go ahead, Pastor Bruce.
Yeah, to Bill's point, the language, I say this often, but you cannot prove the Trinity from the language, just like you just said. It gets a little, in Hebrew, it's ani, which is I am. It's not, what's the Hebrew in at the burning bush? It's asher,
Not a,
asher ai share.
yeah,
It's not ani. It's a different phrase altogether. So when Christians say, well, Yeshua said, I am, that proves the Trinity. No, it doesn't. If you get in an argument with a rabbi, he's going to clean your clock.
mhm,
What I'm always saying is you have to go for the essence. They wanted to kill him because they knew the essence of what he was saying.
right.
They weren't quibbling over the pronouns. That comes later. 2,000 years later. Yeah, so we have to really be careful. You don't use the second person terminology so much. That's more what I use. I would say this is, because this isn't Yeshua proper. Yeshua isn't born yet, but this is the second person of the Godhead. Now, when we say, well, it was Yeshua, that's the essence.
Right.
And we're in agreement with that. But technically, that's not the case. Just like Melchizedek, I think, is a theophany of the second person of the Godhead. But Melchizedek is a different individual than Yeshua. See what I'm saying? This is where we get into big trouble with the Trinity,
Right.
because it's over semantics.
Right.
That's why you got to go for the essence, not the semantics, not the wording so much.
Mhm.
God could be 10 people if you wanted to be,
Well, and if you count them all up, he probably is close to that
Yeah.
or more.
or more. I mean, yeah. So if you have a first, second, and third person of the Godhead, and even that falls short, obviously by definition. But if you go that way, then for me, I keep it a little more clearly delineated, if that makes sense, in my own mind. But when you're trying to explain the Trinity, remember, you cannot understand a Trinity 3 in 1 until you are moving in 6 dimensions.
Yeah.
It's simple as that. We move in 4 dimensions. It is impossible to understand the Trinity.
Mhm.
It's by faith.
Faith,
Yeah.
yeah, you know what, you're right.
And we
It's by
think the
faith.
essence alludes to it. Absolutely.
Right, yeah, no, that's good, and I think you summed it all up, by faith, you know. Go ahead, Sharon.
Just a question. It says of Melchizedek that he was a priest of God without, no father, no mother. And isn't Yeshua also a priest of God?
Yes, yes.
Okay, but I don't know if some people equate the two.
Mhm.
Are they one being or are they?
Choose, yeah. Well, you know, even with Abraham, when he stayed behind to speak to, it says to speak to Adonai, the Lord, you know. I mean, we can refer, Yeshua was there too. So go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I'm sorry, it's just my favorite subject. And I've learned a lot, and I may change my mind next week. I've learned a lot.
For you, Bill.
Even the pushback here, and what you just said is so important, is essence. What you just said was essence is what's so important. In my mind, you know, I still can jump off of 50-foot cliffs on my skis. I know exactly what to do, how to, check out the landing. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
I crush every vertebrae in my body fit, but my essence is who I haven't changed.
Your essence
Yeah.
doesn't grow.
No, and when I, there's two comments. Yeah, we're doing fine. There's two comments. My essence will be put into another container when I pass through that door. I'm not sure I'm gonna change, which is a little scary. You know, I think the bad
Right.
thoughts, all that kind of stuff's gonna be gone, but I think we're all gonna be individuals very similar to what we are now.
Mm,
My opinion.
right,
But the way, also, I avoid words like the Trinity, first, second, third person, all that stuff, like the plague now, partly because of interaction here over the years. But the only example that really explains what the Trinity is like and why it's so difficult to define is the space-time continuum argument.
right,
You know, the universe consists of space, time, and matter, period. You cannot take one away from the other. They all have to be studied as a unit. And when I program robots with my grandkids, okay, let's call that the essence. There's a program on a disk or on the computer
mm,
that gets down-fed into the robot. When the dog comes and eats that robot, we can build another one and download the essence into that one. So that essence was what became Yeshua.
mm.
But
Yeah.
Yeshua, the baby, was not speaking from the bush.
No, no, that's good. That's good. You know what? You do deserve 2 donuts.
I think it's sharing.
But you should.
It's semantics. It's almost always semantics. Because the way I define a word may not be the way you define a word. And I see that in every arena of life these days. Semantics is a huge issue. And often I'll, if I step back and really examine the argument, I realize we're actually saying the same thing, just from different perspectives, even in the church.
Mhm.
I mean, yeah, it's semantics, it's understanding, it's all of these things. So we really have to, it's not a hill to die on. And unfortunately, the church has made the Trinity, that's the sacred
That's
dogma of the
yeah.
church.
Yeah.
And it's brought all kinds of problems through the years.
Right,
We're trying to write commentary on something we can't understand.
Yeah.
And it's problematic because then it sets other people off and so on and so forth. So yeah, I think it's just a huge issue that we have to. It's best when you say, this is my understanding, and then people go, okay, I can see what you're saying.
I don't agree with you, but I can see what you're saying, I get a lot of that, I hear what you're saying, but I get that from my own son. But he goes, I don't agree with you, but I see why you think that, but it's funny, like you're saying, how in your mind you could jump off 50-foot cliffs and land on the snow and just keep going and everything, you know. It's just like when I went to a reunion and one of the guys came up to me and said, "Hey Vince, can you still dunk a basketball?" I told him that was 60 pounds ago and 40 years. But you know, well, let's move on. We're not gonna have enough time, but you know, in Exodus 4, it talks about how God tells Moses that he's gonna lead the Israelites out of Egypt. And God demonstrates to Moses the wonders that he will do before Pharaoh. Moses' staff becomes a serpent, and his hand becomes leprous, if you remember that. Moses feels he is not qualified to speak, so Aaron is going to be his mouthpiece, you know. Moses gets his father-in-law's peaceful approval, and he goes back to Egypt. And this is what we were talking about earlier. Zipporah is not a happy camper because God is ready to destroy all of those on the road because they are not circumcised, you know. So Moses failed to do his moral duty. So Zipporah steps in, and she's a Midianite, you know, but she already understood this. So she stepped in, you know, to take care of the matter, so to speak. But you wonder sometimes, you know, if that's not your custom, you know, and, you know, how are you able to do it, you know? But it reminds me of even my great-grandson when he was born. My grandson called us and said, "Grandpa, you know, for $500, if I had $500, we could circumcise the baby. Otherwise, it's going to cost thousands of dollars if we do it, you know, later on." We said, no. Let the doctor know, do the circumcision. Grandma and grandpa will bring you the money, you know. So our great-grandson was circumcised, you know. But then he was circumcised by a doctor. The doctor is Hispanic, you know, but I guess in college or school or whatever, you learn how to do all these things. Well, I wonder, where did Zipporah learn? What'd I do with this knife? But whatever she did it right. You know, so go ahead, Sharon.
You go from God instructing Moses, everything he's going to do in front of Pharaoh, the signs and wonders.
Yes.
And Moses finally says yes, as long as Aaron's with him. And they're on the road, and then God wants to kill him. I mean, it's just,
Yep.
Okay,
so
I can't understand that.
So I wasn't the only one thinking like that. All right. I thought the same thing, you know, and even Aaron will be my mouthpiece, you know. Well, what kind of relationship did he have with Aaron? You know, because 40 years he was in Pharaoh's palace, you know, and but, you know, so, you know, well, we know that it tells us that Aaron became his mouthpiece. So, you know, then even in Exodus 5, now he's back in Pharaoh's court and he's telling Pharaoh, "Let my people go." And, you know, Pharaoh is, you know, he tells everybody, "Yeah, all you slaves get back to work. You know, I'm not going to let your people go." And we know that later on, we're going to hear of all the plagues that hit Egypt. But that's where we're at right now. Now, when we get to the end of chapter 5, Moses is now back in Pharaoh's face, telling him to let my people go. And this is where I was telling you that when he came before you know, you're just not going to walk in and say, "Hey, God sent me." You know, you know, you're going to walk, you know, at least even to your own people. So this is where he came in and he had to convince them that, yes, the God of our people has sent me to go before Pharaoh and to, he'll let the people go. But what is it that finally said, yeah, he is the man that God sent, and that's why I was telling you when he spoke to the priest and he gave them exactly what God told him to tell them, they accepted it. And they said, yeah, okay, they put their faith in Moses, and that, the last fill-in is in letter A. 5 is Moses was happy living in Midian. And then in letter A, Moses encounters the burning bush. He will be going back to Egypt. Go ahead, Kathleen.
When you're done.
Oh, yeah, and that's the Torah study for today. So go ahead.